I'll start with Charles, actually, if I may. The legacy systems in banks, and all banks have legacy systems, both at the front end and at the back end, actually have served banks pretty well for a very long time, And many banks, despite not having transformed themselves digitally, are still profitable. What's the driver if they're still making money to doing digital?
So that's a very good question. So working with a lot of different customers, what you can see is that banks are sitting on legacy. It's here, and it's always going to be legacy. And even what you're creating right now, in 1 year, will be legacy. So the question is, first, how high is your technical depth? Because what you can see discussing with a lot of CIOs or head of IT department is that all their systems are interconnected with each other's, and it's really hard to change it. And most of the time when we end up discussing with banks about digital transformations, what you find out is that you have to change 90% of the architecture, and then you're discussing about a 2 to 3 years plan. And things are still moving on the market. So the point is, also I will deviate a little bit from your questions, but things are a little bit more complex than that, because when you're discussing with banks, most of the time they are universal, and banks likes to do and to support different line of business. I was actually discussing with one of my very good friend who is a bank executive, and he was telling me, you know, Charles, us as bank, we like to do everything good, but we are not good at everything. And when you're looking at the IT is, when you're looking at the structure, actually, just to come back to also to what you were saying, is that in banks you have different business lines. So you have retail, consumer finance, wealth management, you have micro, SME, corporate, investment banking, and then you go on and you go on. And each of us line is kind of independent, having its own systems. And the first question you're asking when you want to transform is like, hey, what I'm going to start with, because I have 250 people in my IT department, and we cannot do everything at the same time. And that's one of the big problematic. The second one is, how long is it going to take to change my systems? Because my systems are used to run products that we sold 10 years ago. And that's how the hustle starts. So what we advise our clients actually is make it simple and phase it. If you want to build a new organization, just do like, for instance, ABN AMRO did. You make a greenfield, when it works out, then start to migrate. Do it progressively. You don't have to make a big bang from one day to another one. And this is what also Agile is about, I think. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much, Charles. But don't run away, because I have one more question for you before I go to Adam. You mentioned transparency, of course, as being a prerequisite for this, because in a sense that's part of the expectation that customers increasingly have. And I often think that transparency is a prerequisite for control by the customer, because customers want to see not only what's going on within their bank and how decisions are arrived at, they want to see how that's happening everywhere else, so that they can make comparisons and stuff like this. Is that right? Do you think that actually, as customers, and thinking particularly about SME banking customers now, do we actually want that amount of control? Do we actually want to be able to make all of those choices ourselves, or do we actually want to just leave it all to the bank?
Well, I think that it's just our customer expectation that has completely changed. You know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, you were not expecting this from your bank, to be transparent, because it was the way it is. Now, right now, like I said, all those large tech firms are actually really changing our minds, and we got so much used to it that it's unacceptable to not get it when you're going to different providers. So I believe that entrepreneurs, you like to understand what you're buying. And it's the same when I'm actually discussing with corporate clients. When I'm basically engaging on a project or we're making a quotations, I don't hide stuff, and people tell me, hey, if we're going to buy your services, you have to tell us up front how long it's going to take to implement, or how much it's going to cost. And if I come up to a Stirco and you say, hey, you have to pay 10% more because I didn't tell you and it's written there, then my client will just throw me by the window. And I think it's the same from our expectation from our banks. And transparency is becoming a source of trust. And as customers, you like to cooperate with transparent parties, even if they are more expensive, but at least you know what to expect. And transparency is not only about the price, it's about also your customer service. How long is going to take you to solve your problems? How can I basically, engage with you? So.
Excellent, thank you, Charles. Yeah, and that last point about expectations, which is probably one of the most important words in the world, I think, expectations. And we make a big mistake if we forget that everybody has expectations. I meant to say to you, I particularly like the idea of everybody being a millennial. I was a millennial 30 years before they were invented, I think, probably. Or maybe a bit more than that, actually. Adam, if I can come to you, if I may, please. Just thinking about agility in banks. Actually, before I ask you a question, Adam, I'm going to, emboldened by the fact that somebody responded to me before, I'm going to ask you another question. Okay, you've got another chance to force me to an embarrassed laugh. Don't let it happen. Okay, agile. A definition of agile. Okay, this is not meant to embarrass anybody. I'm not going to humiliate anybody or laugh at them if they come up with a definition that I disagree with or anything like that. But actually, does anybody have a word or two that they think we mean when we say agile in a business sense? Anybody got any ideas about that? What do we mean by agile? Gentleman at the back there.
The best synonym is, in my opinion, is learning.
Learning. Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. And you see, I say excellent, so that encourages not only that gentleman, but the rest of you to answer when I ask another question. But actually, it really is an excellent response, because what the words usually used when we talk about agile are nimble and flexible and adaptable, or even decisive. Actually, all of those depend upon how fast we can learn. We can't actually be nimble or adaptable unless we're learning all the time. So thank you very much indeed for that. Adam, there's another. Oh, great stuff. Yeah. See, now we're getting carried away. Now this is great.
Okay, maybe I'll try to notice another point. Agile is about allocation of responsibility down, and that is the difference between hierarchy organization and agile organization. So the group of people fully responsible for the end result.
Absolutely right, absolutely. And in fact, the only way to learn from the marketplace, the only way to be agile and to be flexible and adaptable and nimble enough to respond to the marketplace is actually to devolve decision-making to those people who interact directly with it. And those are the people, normally on a hierarchy, those are the people at the bottom. Those are the people that have been viewed as least important in the past, but actually the ones who engage directly with the customer base. And they're the best feedback loop. So thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you. Okay, Adam. Banking is one of the last strongholds of waterfall methods as opposed to agile methods. And your the building you had, which went from tools and processes up to mindset, was a really, really good illustration of the stages that organizations have to go through in order to become agile. There's an old saying that says, if you want to be really happy, you have to do two things. You have to decide exactly what it is that will make you happy, and then decide what you have to sacrifice to get it. Not what you have to do, but what you have to sacrifice. The same is true, I think, of agile. Do you think it's right to say, first of all, we need to be very clear what we mean when we say we want to be an agile business, and then we need to be very clear about what we're going to sacrifice to get it?
Yes, that's obviously true for sure. I think the most important thing that was stated a few times is about getting less hierarchical in our approach. So that is in the end, this is as well putting responsibility not on the, let's say, top managers in general, but on the teams themselves responsibility, and of course making people possible to way how they want to work, how they want to work. So they are going to establish the way of working the best possible way for specifically them. And I think what we are going to lose, I think, let's say this ego must be, let's say, somehow smaller for these general managers, high managers, and the top hierarchical, because they only can say what they want to achieve in the end, but how to achieve, what will be the steps, this is not their responsibility. So they cannot say in this way of working, I want to do this by these steps, please come to me when this step will be achieved. So I think we as a managers, we need to hide our own egos in the pocket somehow.
That's really interesting, because that's what I was going to ask is how do we move to that change of mindset? And it sounds like you're suggesting that one of the starting points is actually for the management to role model that kind of letting go.
Management is totally crucial, because when people won't see that this is on the every level of organization, because still banks will be some hierarchical oriented and somehow. For sure, there needs to be some management board, there needs to be some, let's say, another directors of areas or whatever we call it, tribes or whatever. But if people who are really working, this is really strange, because directors are working for sure as well. But if the people involved in really developing some products, if they see that this hierarchical way of working is still on the top level, they will not adapt on their own way of working, this different approach that they are used to work.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to go to you in the audience now, actually, just to see if anybody has a question that they would like to ask for either of our panelists. First of all, anybody got a thought that they want to share with the panelists, or a question that they would like to ask? Yes, lady over there.
We see.
Why don't you have in tribes people from risk and legal departments?
This is basically a matter of responsibility in our area. The approach of TribeLead for let's say financing for financing products will be totally different than there are people from risk. So if here we have some hierarchical responsibility for risk people, this can occur with some risk in order that we will, let's say, missell some loans. So this is quite crucial thing, that there have to be another department, area guy or a lady responsible for these risk topics, different from product topics. So this is the way.
It's a very interesting point, actually, because of course, we're in banking and banks are about risk. Can I, just before we go to that lady there, oh yeah, do please, yeah.
So actually, I don't think they exclude each other. I'm working in ING Romania, and we've also implemented. And what you can have, actually, it's not that you don't include them in a tribe, you can have like a business partnership with them. So then you have like somebody that's allocated to you, you exactly know to whom you're working in the risk department. Of course, you need to have that kind of segregation in the end, but you can also find it that for some projects you decide to even have a full person from risk or legal or whatever the content of the project is. It sits together with you until you finalize the project, and it works like a team together with you. You can have that as well. So.
Thank you very much indeed. That's a nice practical example in response to that question. Just before we go on, I have a question for Charles around a similar issue, actually, about the role of risk, particularly the department in the bank that looks after risk in digital transformation. And have you, in your conversations with organizations, have you seen any of that challenge arising?
I think risk are usually not the drivers of transformations. They like to stay in the comfort zone. What you can see, risk, actually, compliance are the main blockers when you want to change, because they are coming up and you do it this way, we haven't been doing this before, etc., etc. So they usually stick to their standards, but you have to onboard them, because also underwriting a client online is different than when you used to underwriting basically in a branch or in a different way, because before you used to ask 25 types of documents, balance statements, etc., etc. And right now, you have to find out the data that you will use to underwrite. So I would say that risk has to be part of the transformation. They are usually not the sponsor of it, but they have to be there, because at the end of the day, a bank is going to send the same product. A loan is a loan, a leasing is a leasing, and the products are actually not that much changing. There are just some promotional offers or whatsoever, but the products remain the same. So,
thank you very much indeed. And light. Oh, that's light. That's good. And actually, this does raise an issue for me, which is risk is at the heart of what banks do. That's the profession that banks are in risk. And consequently, there needs to be a role for risk in both the agile journey and the digital transformation journey. And it's interesting, as you said, Charles, that risk would not normally be the sponsors of the transformation, either transformation, I think. And actually, we should perhaps think that risk ought to be the sponsors of both transformations, bearing in mind that risk and compliance are regulatory and statutory responsibilities for the banks. So actually, there's a pivotal and indeed an upfront role for risk in transformation. So very important. Thank you for raising that, actually. Any other questions very quickly before I move on with another one of mine? Sir, microphone is on its way.
You never use the word matrix structure. When I look into the concept of Agile, I want to ask you the question how it is connected with hierarchy from one side and second-hand matrix structure with vertical and horizontal responsibility, and why you are not connecting these things together.
Okay, so basically starting...
Traditional question.
Yeah, traditional question. Maybe we can get back to this slide. It will be easier to explain or not. So basically we've got, of course, vice president responsible for all this SME mid-corp area, and he's obviously the person in the general who are responsible for this all products, network, branch, etc. So all tribe leads are responding to him. Yes. I don't remember where this was, because like I said, okay, I'm just trying to be, okay, so this is the one. So, yeah, in general, corporate clients division is run by vice president responsible for this. These tribe leads are reporting to him. Yeah, basically there is of course some directors, like Marcin is my director, responsible for some part of that, but basically in general this is his responsibility. And why this works for that? We've got as well IT director responsible for all IT guys. We've got operations director responsible for others, operational people and topics. But if we want to, let's say, work faster, to deliver faster, if we want to work to prepare better solutions to our clients, we decided to go to the agile way of working in order to optimize work in this way, in the level of these products. So this, for example, financing product, cash management products, and as well. And why we didn't, let's say, establish real hierarchic responsibility for, let's say, tribe leads in IT operations, because we see that in general, people from IT needs to have some, let's say, pushing the development of their own knowledge in their area of responsibility. So there is let's say, excellence to help them to work better in their own area of speciality. There has to be some person who is pushing their own let's say speciality to be growth. And that is why, for example, why there is still some IT responsible stuff. Additionally, there are some, of course, obviously, there are some, of course, say needs to be in IT tech area, let's say changes, updates, etc. We, as let's say business people who are running tribes, we don't focus, for example, that there is new version of Java and this has to be updated, whatever. Yeah, on their own applications, we don't want to do that. So there needs to be some people responsible for this, let's say, technology stack to say, okay, we need to have some, let's say, people involved in that area, and they are going to us and hey, we need to have, let's say, two sprints to cover these aspects. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed, Adam. And that's actually a really, really important issue, because there's a word here that we haven't used yet this morning, which is context. Okay, we can't expect any organisation, and ING is a good example of this as a big bank, to suddenly jump at scale straight into agile working, because that isn't going to work. We've seen the necessity of the shift from tools and processes all the way up to mindset. The context for this is that we have an agile initiative within a hierarchical traditional organisation, and that organisation works in a sector, banking and business, which is itself traditionally hierarchical. So there's a real challenge about this journey, this transition, and I think a real need for continued effort and momentum within the agile tribes, within the team, to keep this momentum going, because there will be a lot of inertia, as the gentleman at the back mentioned, there'll be lots of inertia in the whole context of the business world against this. So this is a long journey, and it's going to take some courage. Yep.
I have another question about your organization of Agile tribes. One of the maybe the most important thing about Agile is focus on your goal, on your tasks, and it's also well known that all employees in a bank are overwhelmed with day-to-day operations. How do you balance the workload of tribe members with their everyday duties? Or maybe you fully allocate some people to the tribe, or you balance somehow daily activities and tribe activities?
This is challenge, of course. My main application has over 10 years history of working. So you know, there is 10 years of development, 10 years of making bugs, of making some errors, and of course there will be still some mistakes made. So that maintenance tasks are really important still. How we are dealing with that is a matter of balancing. So we didn't allocate, let's say, group of people responsible only for bug fixing, because this can be frustrating as well for those people, for sure. Yeah, nobody wants to say fix any other people mistakes. And on the other hand, there is some pressure on those guys who are developing stuff to don't make errors, to don't let's say implement errors on production environment, because if you make errors, you will need to deal with some bugs on the production environment. So we said, okay, this is your responsibility as well, in that say squad responsible for developing some area of internet banking to deliver that and to deliver as less bugs as possible. Obviously, zero will be the best possible solution. But in the end, the responsibility of bug fixing, of dealing, of maintenance area, this will be on those people who are involved in squads, who are involved in tribes. And let's say how much time do we spend on those? It depends. After some release, of course, there will be some 20-30%, for example, of time. But if we have, let's say, good sprint, sometimes this is even 0 or 5 minutes per sprint. So this is a matter of balancing.
That's interesting, and that's actually a very agile way to approach it. To be flexible in the degree of responsibility that people take for things. We have literally 2 minutes left in this session, and which means we haven't got time for a really long, involved answer to any question. However, I want to ask both of our panellists to close to give us each a very short, clear, succinct response to a question, which is actually a huge question which you might want to discuss with them later on. And the question is it possible to engage in digital transformation and agile transformation at the same time in a bank? Charles, you want to go first? So you haven't got much time.
So the question is to do this in parallel. I think it depends the maturity of the organization and also what is the existing legacy. I mean, you don't have one answer. Each organization has different problems, different people, different cultures. What I really believe on is that a lot of digital transformation programs of banks are not taking off because what people are doing, either they are trying to basically redesign processes in all technologies by keeping the same culture, very hard, or either they are trying to build new technologies and take their old processes and old culture, which show as non-agile, very hard as well. So it's causing a lot of problems. So of course, tomorrow becoming agile will give you the opportunity basically to also be more product focused and to have your own team specialized per product so you can be more agile and delivering much faster. But first you have to also transform and to work on your legacy. So
thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Adam, your thoughts on that?
Closing words. Yeah, I think this is possible for sure, but this is extremely hard in order to, let's say, set a plan. Starting from tomorrow, we're going to transform in the digital way. We're going to transform in the agile way. Whatever. This is the plan. Like I said, more important thing is to be flexible, to adapt to clients' needs, to adapt to their current situation, to adapt to your own situation, and to go step by step. To be flexible, to go step by step. So okay, the target in a few years. Okay, we want to be digital, we want to be agile, but in general, this is more about mindset and to create some small improvements every day small improvements. I think this is the better way to do it.
Thank you very much indeed. And ladies and gentlemen, I think that two huge discussion items there for us to talk about later on. Thank you very much indeed for your attention, and I'd like us to say thank you to our two panellists, Charles-Alexandre Gamba from ITDS and Adam Walendziewski from ING, for their contributions.